Hey there. So in this video, we are going to complete our notes on the different parts of plants. So this is going to be using packet pages 143, 146, and 147 from our packet. Hopefully we have already cut these out and glued them in to our notebook, but if not, go ahead and pause the video and glue these in now. So beginning with a couple different parts of the plant, we have the cuticle. So the cuticle is a waxy protective covering that helps prevent loss of water. So this is really the outermost layer of the leaf of a plant. And so it feels very waxy, and it just protects the plant from losing all of its water throughout the day and the night. The next part are the roots. The roots help to anchor the plant and to also absorb water and minerals from the soil. And then roots can help store food, for example, like in carrots. So the carrot that we eat is actually the root of the plant. So which cell organelle do you think would be especially large in a plant root cell after it rains? So think about which plant organelle would store water. That would be the vacuole. Vacuole would be very large after it rains because it's trying to absorb all of that water. The next part of the plant is the stem. So the stem connects the roots to the leaves. It helps with transportation of water and nutrients from the roots to the leaves. And then, of course, there is the leaf themselves. The leaves are the site of photosynthesis and are therefore responsible for the exchange of gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then we have the flower itself, which is the reproductive part of an angiosperm. Remember, angiosperms are, they're similar to gymnosperms, in fact, they have vascular tissue, but angiosperms keep their seeds in an enclosed vessel. So let's talk about the transportation of water and other nutrients. So the vascular tissues in the plants are responsible for transporting water and food throughout the plant. The vascular tissues are what allow the plant to actually grow larger in size. We mentioned this in a previous video that angiosperms, gymnosperms, and ferns, because they have vascular tissues, they are able to grow vertically from the ground and to become very tall because they have these tissues that are able to transport water from the roots up to the leaves and then sugar from the leaves down to the roots. Mosses, which are non-vascular, they do not have these tubes, right? They are very small. They do not grow very tall because they wouldn't be able to move any of the food or water. So two tubes used in our vascular tissue. You have the xylem, which transports water mostly, but also minerals up through the plant. So from the roots up to the rest of the plant. And then, of course, the phloem, which transports the sugar from the leaves to every part of the plant. So think of xylem and phloem as basically the veins and arteries like we have in animals. So the xylem and phloem are the veins and arteries of plants. We just don't call them veins and arteries, we call them xylem and phloem. But they're responsible for moving either water, if it's a xylem, or phloem, transporting food. So transpiration in plants is the process of evaporation of water out of the stomata. This helps water move from the roots and out of the leaves. So we know that water evaporates, but when water evaporates specifically from the leaves of plants, we call this transpiration. So on the other side of our notes, let's take a look at gas exchange. So we know the exchange of gases is very important for plants because of the process of photosynthesis. So the first part of the gas exchange is the stomata, sometimes also referred to as a stoma. These are tiny openings that allow for the exchange of gases. So they're these little openings in the leaf. When they are open, they allow for oxygen and carbon dioxide to move freely in and out of the plant. When they are closed, gases cannot move in or out of the plant. Here we can see where the stoma, right, is closed, so no gases can be exchanged. And here the stoma or stomata is open and gases can be exchanged. There are cells surrounding the stoma called guard cells, which are responsible for actually that contraction and release to actually open and close the stomata. And then again, transpiration is evaporation of water from plants. This is just going to help move water, because just like humans, we can have too much water in our system and then we won't be able to maintain homeostasis. And then finally, just these guard cells again, they control the opening and closing of the stomata. Typically, stomata will remain open during the daylight. So while photosynthesis is occurring, to allow for carbon dioxide to be brought into the chloroplast. And then at night, when photosynthesis is not occurring, the stomata will close. Now, that is not always the case. The stomata will open and close as the plant cell needs it to. So this is moving on to packet page 146, looking at a cross section of a leaf. So basically, if I were to take this leaf and use a hole puncher and just punch a hole through it and then use a really, really powerful microscope, I would be able to see all the different layers of that leaf cell. Again, the top layer being that waxy cuticle to prevent water loss. Then we have epidermal tissue, mesophyll tissue, and then again that epidermal tissue. We can see the stomata right here, surrounded by the guard cell. And then, of course, the vascular tissues running through the leaf cell, moving water and nutrients. And then all these little tiny green dots would be the chloroplast, where photosynthesis is occurring. And then here we have another picture of our flower, which remember we know is the reproductive part for angiosperms. Remember, the carpel is the female reproductive part. So I added this here for us to add to our notes, because remember, if I write it, you write it. If I took the time to write it, it's probably important for you. So the carpel, made up of the stigma, style, and ovary, make up the female reproductive parts. And then the stamen make up the male reproductive parts, which is the anther and the filament. And then we have the seeds that are used in angiosperms and gymnosperms. There are two different types of seeds, monocots and dicots. Dicots, for example, are like beans. See, I have two sides. So di meaning two. So dicot. And then monocot, this is just one singular embryo. So dicot versus monocot as far as our seeds. And then finally, reproduction, again, just comparing, contrasting spores and seeds. Spores are very small reproductive cells that can grow into the new plant. They are considered an adaptation to life on land due to them being very lightweight, so they can be very easily transported via wind. Remember, we said that ferns use spores to reproduce. They use wind. And then, of course, there is the seed, which is a little bit more advanced and complicated. It's still pretty small, but it is the embryonic plant with a protective covering called a seed coat. And some of them can store food for the embryo. So let's go ahead and make sure we copy down this chart right into our notebook with packet page 146. There's enough room underneath this little section right here talking about reproduction. So spores are a single cell. They do not contain a supply of nutrients. So if the spore does not find, let's say it's a fern, if a fern spore does not find another fern, then it will die pretty quickly and reproduction will not occur because there's no nutrients stored within the spore. Seeds have multicellular embryo inside, so they're a little bit more complicated, and they contain a supply of nutrients. So seeds, again, let's use our example of the apple. A deer or let's say a bear comes along and it eats the apple, and then it walks a couple, 5-10 miles, and then the bear poops out the core of the apple containing all the seeds, and now the seed was able to survive that through the digestive tract of the bear, and it now has a nice pile of fertilizer that it can use to grow. Now, both spores and seeds, they have a protective coating. They can survive in dry conditions, and they contain DNA from their parent plant. So it is sexual reproduction. Taking a look, though, at the size difference between a spore and a seed, it is crazy how tiny the spore is compared to the size of the seed. But again, we've got to remember that seeds are storing nutrients, whereas spores are not. And then our final packet page here, 147, looking at examples of how seeds are dispersed. So some seeds can be dispersed by the wind. So as we can see, they tend to look like fans. So that way they can be picked up by the wind and travel to another spot. Some seeds are adapted to be picked up by animals. So they tend to be kind of spiky, so that they get stuck to the fur of the animal or to the pant legs of humans, really, but originally just animals. Some are meant to be dispersed by water. So as we can see, that this is pretty flat. It would float right along the water. Some seeds will burst, and then this will just scatter. Some flowers will burst, and this will scatter the seeds. And then, of course, other seeds get spread by humans. They get stuck to our clothes, or we intentionally disperse them through picking them and then transporting them to another location. So that is it for our notes on plant parts. And again, this was packet pages 143, 146, and 147. If you have any questions about these notes on plant parts, please make sure to let me know. Thanks.